The medical team believed I was trapped in a coma, with no awareness of the world around me. My family believed I would never open my eyes again. Both assumptions turned out to be completely wrong, and that single mistake destroyed the future they had already started planning. My name is Nathan Carter. I was 58 years old and had spent more than 20 years building a successful logistics company in Naples, Florida. Every long night, every missed vacation, and every sacrifice was made for the people I loved most. My wife, Laura, had shared 3 decades of marriage with me. My son, Kyle, collected a paycheck from the business without doing much work. My daughter, Emma, rarely reached out unless she wanted a favor. My stepson, Brandon, had become my second in command. And although we never completed the adoption paperwork, I'd always considered him my own son. Everything changed on an ordinary evening when a reckless driver ran a red light and crashed directly into my vehicle. The impact left me fighting for my life. My body refused to respond, but my mind remained awake inside the silence. I could hear every voice, every conversation, and every word spoken beside my hospital bed, while everyone believed I was completely unaware. The greatest shock came when Laura spoke to the doctor. With a calm voice that carried no hesitation, she requested that I not be revived if my condition became worse. She confidently claimed I had always said I never wanted machines keeping me alive. That conversation had never happened. Kyle quickly supported her story, telling the doctor I would never want to become a burden. Lying there unable to move, while my own family decided my fate was more painful than the accident itself. During the following week, I listened as their masks slowly disappeared. Kyle openly discussed the inheritance he expected once my estate was settled. Emma complained that visiting the hospital was becoming inconvenient and blamed me for spending too much time working instead of attending every important moment in her childhood. Brandon remained calm and focused, already talking about taking over my company and managing the transition after I was gone. Not one of them sounded heartbroken, though they sounded like people waiting for paperwork to be completed. 7 days later, I finally opened my eyes. My family rushed into the room with tears, hugs, and relieved smiles. They thanked God I had survived and acted as though they had never stopped believing in my recovery. I smiled back and thanked them for standing beside me. Inside, however, I had already made my decision. They believed I remembered nothing, and I intended to use that misunderstanding to uncover the truth. Once I returned home, I secretly hired a new attorney and a private investigator. I wanted facts instead of suspicions. What they uncovered was far worse than anything I had overheard in the hospital. Brandon had quietly stolen more than $500,000 from my company using fake invoices and hidden accounts. Laura had approved many of those transactions herself. Together, they had even prepared forged legal documents that would have transferred ownership of my home and business properties if I had died. My accident had simply accelerated a plan that was already in motion. The investigation uncovered another devastating betrayal. Laura had been carrying on a relationship with a younger personal trainer for more than a year. While I was working late nights to provide security for our future, she had been building a new life behind my back. Even worse, Emma had discovered the financial fraud months earlier and chose not to warn me. Instead, she accepted money in exchange for staying silent. At that moment, I realized my greatest mistake had never been trusting strangers. It had been trusting the people who shared my last name. I refused to let anger make my decisions. Instead, I moved every dollar that legally belonged to me into protected accounts, rewrote my will, removed every family member as a beneficiary, and instructed my attorney to prepare lawsuits and criminal complaints. Then I agreed to celebrate my 30th wedding anniversary exactly as Laura had planned, inviting our relatives, neighbors, and longtime friends to what they believed would be a joyful evening. The celebration looked picture perfect. Music played softly across the backyard, while guests laughed and raised glasses in our honor. When everyone gathered for a toast, I thanked them for coming before explaining that surviving a coma had given me an unexpected gift. I told them I had heard every conversation spoken, while everyone believed I was unconscious. The smiles around the yard slowly disappeared. I handed Kyle an envelope containing the transcript of every selfish word he had spoken about my inheritance, along with an official termination letter ending his employment at my company. His inheritance had been replaced with exactly $1,000. Emma received an envelope containing proof that she had accepted stolen money to remain silent. She would receive the same amount and nothing more. Laura stepped forward next. Inside her envelope were photographs proving her affair, copies of every fraudulent document she had signed, and divorce papers that had already been filed. I quietly reminded her that she had looked into a doctor's eyes and decided my life was no longer worth saving. Every guest watched in complete silence as the reality of her choices became impossible to deny. Finally, I turned toward Brandon. I reminded him that I had raised him, trusted him, promoted him, and loved him as if he had been my own flesh and blood. Then I informed him that law enforcement had already approved criminal charges for fraud, forgery, and identity theft. Seconds later, deputies entered the backyard and placed him under arrest in front of everyone. His expression changed from confidence to disbelief as he realized the man he expected to inherit from had become the witness against him. When the deputies left, not a single person spoke. Every lie had been exposed. Every betrayal had been dragged into the light. I thanked my guests for attending, wished them a pleasant evening, and quietly walked away from the family I no longer recognized. My luggage had already been packed inside my car. As I drove away, my phone filled with calls and messages from Laura, but I ignored every one of them. Before putting my phone away, I sent a single text that required no explanation. I heard every word. They had expected to divide my fortune after my funeral. Instead, they were left to face the consequences of every choice they had made, while I finally drove toward a future where trust would have to be earned instead of assumed.